I follow that story to the completion of a first draft until I feel like I know who she is. And then I go back and start again.
Welcome to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, the go-to podcast for high performers. I'm Andrew Moses, and each week I talk with Olympians, pro athletes, TV stars, Grammy winners, best-selling authors, CEOs, and other high performers to uncover their success secrets. Every conversation is jam-packed with inspiration and actionable ideas we all can apply to our own lives, personally and professionally. Get ready for a behind-the-scenes look at the techniques, processes, and mindsets powering the world's most successful people. Let's go. Hi, friends. This week, my guest is national best-selling author Annabel Monaghan. Annabel has always been passionate about writing, literature, and communication. In college, she studied English at Duke University, but didn't immediately pursue a career as a novelist. Instead, she went on to get an MBA from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania and spent the beginning of her career in investment banking. Eventually, though, Annabel went back to her passion, writing, and ultimately has become a best-selling author. Her work includes novels like Nora Goes Off Script, Same Time Next Summer, and her most recent novel, Summer Romance, which came out this past June and was an instant USA Today and Washington Post bestseller. Our conversation is filled with powerful ideas about being true to yourself, following your passions, filtering out the things that impede your success, and so much more. Annabel's story is absolutely inspiring, and I hope you take away as much from it as I have. So, let's pull the tarp and get straight to Annabel Monaghan. Where I want to begin, you studied English at Duke University. So I'm curious, was writing and literature and communication always something that you were passionate about? Talk about that for a moment and kind of the decision to major in English.
Yes. So that was honestly the only thing I was ever interested in or good at. When I was a little kid, I wanted to be a writer. The only subjects I really focused on in high school were English and writing. And so I chose Duke because it had a really strong English program, and I was going to go there and become a writer. So that was it didn't actually work out that way, but that was my intention as I started.
So were there, as a youngster, as a young adult, teenager, were there authors, was there particular types of literature that you were drawn to, or was it all the above?
It was everything. I was raised in this house where we weren't allowed to watch TV until everybody was working full time. And then I was just home alone and I could catch up on TV. So I do know TV. But the rule was that if you were able to read something, you could read it. There was no censorship on reading. So I, at a very young age, read just the most inappropriate stuff like Danielle Steele and Sidney Sheldon. I think I was about 11 when I read Nora Ephron's Heartburn. And that was the first time that I read a voice where I thought, yes, this is what I want to do. I read a lot of Margaret Atwood, which is my favorite, but I could never write that way. Reading Nora Ephron kind of made me feel like there was a more casual way to approach writing that was really appealing to me.
What was it that you saw in her writing that you felt like made it more accessible, more casual, I think was the approachable? And were you able to kind of implement that in your own writing right away?
It was permission. It was permission to not be serious all the time, to not always be grammatically correct. Sometimes you have to throw out the rules to just make a 2-word sentence. And that 2-word sentence lands. It just appeals to me so much. And I think that as I thought about when I was younger, when I thought about becoming a writer, I was going to have to be Shakespeare, which is really just not my personality. So her writing felt like permission to just do it a different way.
So would you write kind of outside of school assignments? Did you have spiral notebooks where you had stories going at that point, kind of, in the early days, or?
Yeah, I did. And terrible stuff. Hopefully I don't even have them anymore, but just sort of stories about, it was like coping. It was like how I would reframe the world. I would write a story about something that had happened, but I would change the ending. And I just like doing it. I still really like writing. Like, I don't write because it's my job and because I have to write. I would write anyways.
That's a fortunate place to be in, right? There's a lot of people who write and create for a living, but they find it they enjoy it, but they find it to be like a painful process, kind of filled with anguish to get through. But you genuinely, it's not saying it's not hard work for you, but you enjoy it. You genuinely enjoy it as you do it.
It's definitely hard work. And I never want to say that it's not hard work, but I actually enjoy it. And I will get back a round of edits from my editor, and I will need to start over a book, and I'll think, ooh, okay, let's go. Like, it just doesn't, it's hard, but I enjoy it. It's the way other people feel about running.
Yeah, yes, that's a great comparison. That is a great comparison. I can kind of start to visualize you sitting there when you get the edits from the editor saying, all right, let's go. We're going to get to do this because this is something that I really enjoy and love immersing myself in. So, okay, let's kind of fast forward from Duke University studying in English. You went on to get an MBA at the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. So that seems like a slightly different path than following the English degree to become a writer. Like, talk about that for a moment.
I mean, it's ridiculous. So I mean, it was just a totally different side thing. When I was a senior in college, all of my friends were planning to move up to New York City. And we were 20, 21 years old. And that sounded fantastic. But I did not have the financial means to move to New York City and figure out how to be a novelist. Like, there was no trust fund in play. So I realized I had to get a job like a normal person. And I got a job on Wall Street. And I thought that I would write at night. I'd be like a banker by day and a writer by night. And I didn't understand that the job was all the time. So I stopped writing. And it was like a little bit of a growing up experience where I realized at that moment that, like, there was no Santa Claus and I wasn't going to be an astronaut and I needed to just like be a person. So I sort of gave up on the dream. And the thing to do after you do that job for a couple of years is to go to business school.
And the job was investment banking?
It was at Goldman Sachs. I was in their equities division. So I wasn't actually in investment banking then. And I was interested in it, and it seemed like the thing to do. So I went to business school, and I met my husband there. And then I got a job in investment banking, graduated from business school, came back to New York, and, was going to fight the good fight, and absolutely was not good at that job. I mean, I can't say it enough. I just was not a good investment banker, and I did not love it. And when I got pregnant, I quit. So I did that job for 3 years before I quit. And then I was at home with 3 little kids till I was 37. I didn't write anything until I was 37.
So I want to go back to something you said there moments ago. You didn't think you were good at it, in that piece of your career, and you also didn't enjoy it. Do you think it was the type of thing that you could have gotten better at, you could have gotten good at, had you enjoyed it?
Yes. But working 100 hours a week, doing something that you don't enjoy, that was never going to happen. It wasn't the kind of thing where I quit to make the sacrifice to take care of my children. I was so grateful to quit. And I was actually happy to be home with kids for that time.
Were there things that you learned that you still feel like you took away from that experience, even though it wasn't an enjoyable experience, that you can still apply today?
Oh, 100%. And that is actually the spin to take on it. I don't think any education is a waste. Anything that you learn, you're going to use somehow. And understanding financial markets, I majored in finance. Understanding all of that has been a huge part of my life. It should be a huge part of everybody's life. And the people that I met and the experiences that I had, I mean, even working in banking, I mean, if you're going to make a career out of creating dramatic situations on the page, it's nice to immerse yourself in a little bit of drama. I wouldn't trade any of it.
So then, all right, let's dig into, I think you said it was at 37 years old that you began kind of this next phase of your career. Was that this or was that something else?
It was something else. So I wrote my first young adult book with a friend when I was 17, or when I was 17, when I was 37, feels like 17 looking back. And it wasn't as all like, oh, I suddenly had the courage and, an epiphany that I was going to do this thing. She wanted to write this book, and her confidence dragged me along until finally I gave in and said, sure, I'll write this book with you. No one ever read it, but it was published by Simon and Schuster, and it kind of got me going. Like, it reminded me how this was the thing that I really wanted to do. So a few years later, I wrote my first novel for young adults by myself, and people that read it liked it. Not that many people read it. I wrote a sequel. And then it was, I think, 10 years after that before I started writing the books that I'm writing now.
It's fascinating to think about, like 17, 18 years old, you make this decision to major in English. You had said earlier, it was kind of like the only thing you ever felt you were really good at. Everything you kind of like, it was the only thing really in school that you knew and loved and kind of worked at deeply. And then almost 20 years or so go by. And then this friend kind of pulls you back in and just gives you this, even if it was just a little bit of a taste of it again. And that was enough to kind of conjure up that energy and enthusiasm for something that had been kind of so near and dear to you for so long. So then I would imagine the jump from young adult to writing the types of novels that you write now, I mean, it's a different category, different audience. What went into that? What was kind of the spark to write the Nora Goes Off script, which I guess you could say is the debut of your adult fiction career?
It's the first book that I ever wrote that anyone's ever heard of. That was my first big book. And I wrote that book when I was 50. So, I mean, if you have listeners who are late starters, I'm here to tell you it's possible.
That's actually a very common theme we talk about. We talk about, there's plenty of people who have success at a very early age, and that's wonderful. But there are so many countless examples in every category of people who achieve success or breakthrough at a later stage in life. A number of months ago, we talked to a Olympic snowboarder who won his first gold medal at the age of 40 after years of trials and tribulations. There's countless stories of that, Annabel. I'm so glad you put a pin in that for listeners.
I think that right now in my life, I have more to offer than I've ever had to offer. And if I had that trust fund coming out of college and I could have just sat down and started writing a novel, I don't know what I would have said. So it's great that I started late. But I wrote those young adult novels. And at that same time, I started writing a column for adults. It was in my local paper. And then it got picked up all over the place. And to my surprise, my column, which was basically like mom stuff, about like household ha-has, like the poor man's Irma Bombeck, if you're old enough to remember her, that was very successful. And I wrote that column for 10 years. And so while I was doing that, looking back, I think that I was sort of developing my grown-up voice and developing the confidence to write about my actual life and about actual things. When you write about young adults, there's a distance there. Like, you're writing about a life that you're not living anymore. So COVID happened, the world shut down, and it just felt like time. I sat down and I wrote Nora Goes Off script. I thought we were all dying. I didn't know anybody was ever going to read it. It was just like I was ready to write that book.
So you write that book. Was there a moment writing it where you felt like this could be a hit? This could be a big success. I mean, you talked about earlier writing work that not a lot of people read, or some books that you felt like were good and you did sequels, but not a lot of people read them. Not a lot of people bought them. This one was a massive success.
Yeah.
Did you feel it when you were writing it? Was there a point along the way when you thought that this was the possibility that this was going to be kind of the breakout, for lack of a better term, for your career as a novelist?
I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew it was good. And I knew I would go back to writing it every day, and I would open the document, and I usually like read the last chapter so I can get my mind back into the book. And I would get this feeling like, when you go on a first date and you think you're falling in love, I would have that feeling the whole time. And I just knew if I was feeling this way, there was something here. So yeah, I think on some level, I didn't know if anybody was ever going to read it. I made my family read it, and they just were like, ho hum, please don't make us read your weird romance book. But I knew it was something.
Did that feeling, like you talked about that, like first date feeling where you feel like you're falling in love, did that ever go away at any point in that process of writing that book?
No.
And that's a signal that you were onto something. So I'm curious, and you've been over the last few years, it seems like if I just look at the published dates here, you're pretty much releasing something every June the last few years.
Yep.
So were you already working on Same Time Next Summer when Nora Goes Off Script was published? Or
yes,
did you have the success with Nora Goes Off Script and then agree to write Same Time Next Summer?
No. So I think the way it went was they bought it. From the minute the book is finished until the minute it comes out, it's about a year. So they bought Nora Goes Off Script. It was going to come out the following year. I'm popping champagne, and they're like, so what else you got? And I was like, well, what do you mean? I wrote that book. Isn't that enough? So then I started writing. So I'm always finishing a book when a book comes out.
In a way, and I've talked about this with other authors like that are in that similar cadence as you are. And in a way, it's kind of neat because you're writing the other book before you're kind of comparing it to the results, before you have the results, the commercial results of the prior book.
Yeah.
Right. So you're writing Same Time Next Summer before you knew for sure that Nora Goes Off Script was going to be a mega hit.
Yeah. Can I say something about that?
Sure.
Because you have my biography, you know that I am a person who has a left brain, and that I can look at all the data and I can see what's successful and what people are saying and all that stuff. If I engage with that, I cannot do my job. So I really make an effort to not notice if my book is a success, to not look at what the Amazon rankings are before it comes out, to not engage, because that honestly, it shuts me down and puts me in a business mind where I need to be in a creative mind. So I put parameters around that. Like once a book is out, I will check my sales once a week on Saturday mornings. That's my rule. But I can't play that game all the time because it would make me crazy.
I'm so glad that you made that point and put a pin in that as well. I talk about focusing on inputs versus outputs. Like a huge through line in the conversations that I've had with so many of the world's most successful people is the idea that you have the ability and the discipline to focus first and foremost on the inputs. And the inputs being let's just use a very, very simple example. Somebody who says that they want to read more books. Well, what's the input? The input is reading 10 pages a day. Well, you can control that, right? The inputs are things that you can control. A Major League Baseball hitter will say, look, I can't ultimately control whether I get a hit, whether I hit a home run, whether I make an out. But what I can control is if I go about my process the right way, whether if I get 8 to 10 hours of sleep the night before, or if I'm eating the right things, if my mind is focused and I'm focused on the focal point and I'm doing my breath work and all the things that I can control.
Yeah.
I can't control at the end of the day, what happens. You could write the best possible book that ever existed on the planet and people still may not enjoy it. That ability that you have to not only compartmentalize, but the fact that you've kind of put in place processes to make sure that you regulate that for yourself is very, very impressive. That idea of having this routine where, look, I'm going to look at sales only once a week on Saturdays, and I'm not going to let it kind of infiltrate my thinking and my work and my creativity the rest of the week is very, very fascinating. I think such an important lesson for everybody listening to take away from, regardless of it is what any of us are working on.
Yeah, I think that you have to learn in life what it is that will take you down. And for me, it's overwhelm. I don't like multitasking. I don't like to feel like when I have too many things on my plate, I will shut down. So I know that I have to just focus on the one thing. And the one thing that I am in full control over is how good of a book I am writing. And then once it's out there, I'm not in control of what you think of it. And I mean, I don't read reviews, if that's your next question. Like, I don't want to hear how great I am or how terrible I am. That would turn me into a maniac. So that's how I approach it.
What about other authors? Obviously, you and I have talked about how the network of authors is very impressive in the way that authors kind of work together to lift one another up and cheer each other on. But I would imagine, again, you've got to put good parameters in place, to use your word again, parameters in place to make sure that you don't succumb to this comparison game and say like, well, I could have written that. I could have done that. Or, wow, they're putting out so many books. Like, have you put parameters in place to make sure that you're staying connected with the author community, but you're also not going to fall victim to that comparison game?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Somebody is going to write a book that is very similar to the book that you wrote, and it is going to strike a chord that is different than yours did. That is going to happen every single time. I think that with writing fiction, it's so personal. Like the books that I write, only I could write them. Like all of my stuff is in my books, my whole lifetime of experience. And I couldn't write the book that Ellen Hildebrand wrote because that's her whole lifetime of experience. So the comparison, it just doesn't make any sense. It's not like we're running a race and who ran it faster. It's like all the inputs are different.
Well, we've talked about some of these parameters that you put in place, I think kind of like to support the process that you have to create this wonderful work. Now I want to kind of dive right into the center of how you create. So creative process, you talked about you're not a multitasker. You like sinking your teeth into what you're working on in that moment so you don't get that overwhelm as you described. Paint the scene for me and for listeners. What does it look like when you're writing? What's your process look like?
I wish I had a different answer than the answer I have. I wish I had a process that I could tell you about and you'd think I was really together. I don't have a process. When I am writing, when I'm creating material, like right now I'm editing a book that I'm finishing, so it's different. But when I am creating material and I'm writing the first 5 drafts of a book, I wake up at 5:00 in the morning. And I do that because I learned during COVID, like, did your clock get off during COVID? Like when we were all locked down, it was like, I was just up and going to sleep at 8:00.
Totally off.
Yeah, I loved it. Anyways, at 5:00 in the morning, my brain is not entirely awake. And so the part of me that is creative just goes. But the part of my brain that says, wait, did you call the sprinkler guy? And maybe you shouldn't, like all of that other noise isn't awake yet. So I tap into early morning. I am just much more creative. So that's my process. And I will write for the first part of the day until I need to walk a dog or do something. And that is, I will just follow my story and see where it takes me. I always start with an idea. It's usually a person who has a particular job and situation. Like with Nora, I just started with a woman who is made for TV romance writer who's never really been in love. That's all I had. And I follow that story to the completion of a first draft until I feel like I know who she is. And then I go back and start again. That's the process.
I just want to say, Annabel, a process doesn't have to be like something with like formal and structure and like so like finely tuned and coordinated. No matter what you do, like the way you do it is your process.
Yeah.
And I just feel seen. And the way you characterize the getting up in the morning and being creative and those kind of like call the sprinkler guy, like that not entering your brain, that's exactly how I feel in the morning.
Yeah.
When I get up early, I do feel like there's a level of creativity and focus, and that, for lack of a better term, that noise is not necessarily entering kind of my frame of view or field of view yet. And I'm able to do great work. I'm able to put good plans in place, things of that nature. So I just want to say thank you. I feel seen. You characterize that in a way that I haven't been able to describe before.
All right. The world just hasn't gotten to you yet, which is why you shouldn't wake up in the morning first thing and look at your Instagram. Like you should never do that because you've scared away the part of you that's your best part.
There's something interesting also, like when I go out like early morning and I walk around the neighborhood or I walk around trails nearby our house. And I realized recently that like it was a lot quieter than I gave it credit for. And like I tried to figure out like, well, why? Because we live in a relatively quiet area. I was like, why does it seem so much quieter now? And I'm like, well, there's not Amazon trucks. There's not lawnmowers out. There's not like things that on an afternoon walk, like I didn't necessarily think would bother me so much. You know, it's still nice to go out for a walk in the afternoon, but there was something different. There was just something different about that quiet. And I've read a lot recently about this idea of like walking and standing near water, whether it be, a natural lake or body of water, or even like a man-made lake or body of water. There's something about that spurs creativity and calm. It's very interesting. Do you get out for walks and find that creativity comes when you're out walking the dog, as you said, or doing things like that?
Yes, but I have to have just written. So the distinction is this. I talk to other authors who say they take a walk and they get a great idea and then they start a book. I don't get any ideas unless I'm writing. So if I wrote for 4 hours and I take a walk with my dog, then I start getting more ideas. But I need, like, typing is the thing that starts the process for me. So I have to get engaged with my book every single day. And if I'm stuck, I can't just sit there and think. I have to keep writing. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. So I'm curious, when you're writing and you get to a spot that you just can't figure out, like, what do I want this character to say, or where do I want them to go next or do next? Do you not continue until you figure that piece out? Or do you put, parentheses or a question mark and say, I need to come back to that and I'm just going to keep going? Like, how does that work?
I try to keep going. I mean, I will write a chapter that's 3 lines long and just keep going.
Just keep going.
And I kind of know the thing that happens that makes it start to feel easy is when I understand how my characters feel. Like if I understand who they are, which usually isn't until the 3rd draft, if I understand who they are and what they're afraid of and how they feel, then I always know what's going to happen in the next chapter because I'm in their body. It's like method acting or something. I don't know what it is.
Very fascinating.
A little strange.
I'm curious. It's interesting. I've had the good fortune of talking to so many creative people, and everybody has their own way of doing things that when you find kind of what works for you, it's really an unlock. And I think just trying different things and again, figuring out what works for you has such a powerful impact on our work. So I'm curious, as we get ready to wrap up our conversation, have you given any thought to like what you would be doing professionally at this point had your friend not said, let's write that young adult book, and kind of like pulled you back in? Do you think something else would have pulled you in eventually to do this and go down this path?
I think that I was always going to be on this path. And I just didn't have my own confidence to say, you know what, it's time, let's do that. I had to borrow her confidence. I think that I was always going to end up here. Maybe for 3 or 4 years, I taught novel writing at Sarah Lawrence College, which I enjoyed teaching. And clearly, now that you've heard my process, I'm probably not a great teacher of how to write a novel because I have no idea. But I did enjoy doing that. And I enjoyed working with writers. So maybe I would have ended up working with writers.
I had the opportunity to teach a college course as an adjunct professor a few years ago. And I have told people that it was one of the best experiences that I've had. It's something that I definitely want to do again. And what was neat is that I sure hope the students got a lot out of it. I certainly put a lot of effort and work into it, but I got so much out of it. It was so neat. I taught a night class. I think it was like 6:30 to 9 o'clock on like Tuesday nights. And this was after, like a full day of work and having young kids. And, there's a lot going on, lots of things kind of tiring me out. And I would always drive to campus feeling tired. And I would always drive away from campus 2.5, 3 hours later, feeling more energized, but not just more energized. Hearing the questions that the students asked had kind of taught me something and helped me learn better. And also just the process, to use that word again, the process of preparing a lesson plan, thinking how I was going to communicate things, made me learn things, that I thought I knew even better.
Wow. I will just say, you probably know this, but that is something you should be doing. If you walk out of there energized and feeling more in command of what you know, you should be doing that all the time.
Well, it's certainly something that's energized me. And I've had the the great fortune since of leading workshops and keynotes for different teams and groups and organizations. It's not quite teaching a college class, but I've done a lot of that since, where I share the Everybody Pulls the Tarp story. I share lessons that I've learned from these nearly 200 conversations with many of the world's most successful people. And that gives me energy too. Maybe there is something to that, Annabel. And when something sends you a signal, you have to listen to that signal.
Anything that you do, social interactions that wear you out, you got to stop doing it.
Fortunately for so many of your readers, Annabel, you had that friend who kind of pulled you along and gave you, as you said, the confidence to borrow, to go down that path when you did. I know everybody who's listening to this conversation is taking away powerful lessons that we're all going to be able to apply to our own crafts, our own lives, and be better for it. I know every single reader, I've had a lot of listeners reach out. They know authors, they know I interview a lot of authors on this podcast. They said, you've got to get Annabel Monaghan. You've got to get Annabel Monaghan. So I know there's a lot of people out there listening who are going to be really excited to kind of get a little bit of a behind the scenes into your story. There is no question that you are a tarp puller. You live the Everybody Pulls the Tarp mindset, as I talk about every single week on this show. You work hard. You put in the work. You're willing to do whatever it takes. You lift others up along the way. I am so grateful that we've got a chance to have this conversation, Annabel.
Oh, thank you so much. This was so much fun.
All right, everyone. If you loved this episode, you might also enjoy my interview with Hootie and the Blowfish drummer and two-time Grammy Award winner, Jim Sonnefeld. In 1989, Jim and bandmates Mark Bryan, Dean Felber, and Darius Rucker were playing gigs at small bars and fraternity parties at the University of South Carolina. They booked their own gigs, hung up posters to promote their shows, and scraped money together to reserve time at local recording studios. Ultimately, they'd go on to achieve massive success, winning 2 Grammy Awards and selling over 25 million albums worldwide. Jim's story is remarkable, and this is another episode you don't want to miss. Check it out and let me know what you think. Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Twitter at Andrew H. Moses. That's Andrew H. Moses. And be sure to sign up for my email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Today's a great day to pull the tarp. I am rooting for you. See you next time.